Hello and welcome back to the channel of Motorcycle Palaver. Today's a bit of a weird one because I'm reviewing my own bike that I've owned for a year. Here it is, it's the 2020 Ducati Hypermotard 950 SP. I'm going to give you a walk around, tell you what I liked, what I've not liked about it in a year of owning it, in a kind of fair and unbiased way. But mostly it's excellent and values are on the up and you should buy them right now. Maybe this exact one. Let's go. Grr, looks angry, doesn't it? And it kind of is. I am going to go out for a ride and take you along for a bit of a razz on it, but first of all I'm going to give you a quick walk around, talk about some of the bits and bobs, which will be longer than usual because obviously I spent 12 months with this bike and I spent my own money on it. So let's get cracking. Right, before we get going, let's just point out it's July 2021 and Ducati has just released an updated version of this bike with Euro 5 compliant engine and a new paint scheme that doesn't look anywhere as nice as this one. So yeah, I bought this a year ago and I think I paid, what's a £14,300 motorbike, I think. This one's got some options on it to take it to around £15,000, which is a hell of a lot of money for a bike that only has 114 horsepower. But we'll get on to why that kind of doesn't matter in a bit. You can get the normal one without lots of the fancy bits, and that is 12 grand, I think. But anyway, let's start. Let's just look at it. Obviously, it is a Hypermotard. That means it's an angry naked BMX stunt thing. I love the SP basically because of the way it looks. It looks so much sexier than the standard bike. And I actually had an SP press bike booked in a year ago to test, but I got impatient. I wanted a bike. This is my COVID bike because I thought I'm not going to be going traveling. I don't need a big adventure bike. I just want a bike to hoon around my local roads, which are kind of quiet, slightly crappy roads like these, and this kind of fit the bill perfectly. I went and test rode a non-SP, loved it, and bought this without ever riding an SP. It turned up and I loved it even more. So the SP, obviously it gets the Ducati racing colours of white, red, and you can't really see, but black here, and there's a bit of black there, and there's a little bit of black there. So it isn't just red and white, there is black on it. Obviously you've got the beak, classic Hypermotard beak. Kind of quite an old school headlight. It's halogen. It's got these two fang-like daytime running lights either side, so it's really recognisable out on the road. And I've put the style package on it, which includes the carbon fibre screen. This carbon fibre front mudguard is standard. I've put an Evotech radiator protector on it and oil cooler protector just to stop getting holes in them. And this carbon fibre is also standard on the SP. And the style pack also adds things such as little carbon fibre tank protector, the billet Rizoma fuel cap, which you undo using this little thing on the key, and this little billet Rizoma fuel pump cover, which I keep forgetting about, to be honest. I've also put the LED indicators on this bike, or had them put on when I bought it, and lo and behold, it's got heated grips on it, which is an optional extra as well. So that's kind of what it is. The package though is quite complete, I think it's fair to say, as you'd expect for a 14 grand motorbike. They haven't really cheaped out on any of the components, so let's talk about the chassis first. It's 198 kilos wet, which is 4 kilos lighter than the bike before it, the 939 SP. And it's 1.5 kilograms lighter in the engine department as well, and they kind of made some of these trellis tubes thinner to save weight, and it's got this kind of new rear trellis subframe that you didn't get on the 939, which is super pretty. The SP gets a flatter seat than the regular one, but it's actually thin between your legs where you sit. So although the seat height is pretty intimidating, what is it? It's 890 mil, the seat height, 870 mil on the standard non-SP version, but Ducati says the leg curve is smaller than before. So the actual, once you're on it, the stretch to the ground isn't as big. Part of the reason for that really, really lofty seat height is the longer travel suspension that you get on the SP. So I think it's an extra 25 mil over the standard one, I think. And you've got these fat, I think they're 48 mil fully adjustable Erlin's forks. And yeah, that gives you an extra 3 degrees of lean angle over the non-SP for something like 47 degrees before it decks out. I've never decked this out. I imagine if you took it on a track day, you probably could eventually, thanks partly to the standard fit Super Corsa SP tyres, the version 3. You don't get them on the non-SP, you get Diablo Rosso Corsa 3s. And on the SP you get Marchesini forged wheels, which are lighter obviously than the ones on the non-SP. So basically it's covered in trick bits, The brakes are really good on this. They're Brembo M4 monoblocks. They're not stylemas or anything like that, but they do the job plenty well. And then we'll talk about that when we get onto the riding. Right, let's give you a quick squiz at the screen. It's not massively sexy or exciting or huge, much like my penis, but there it is. It's a little 4.5-inch screen, and you have got riding modes on this bike. It's got a 6-axis IMU. So in terms of riding modes, you have Sport, Touring and Urban, which I've used in the rain a couple of times. So basically I leave it in Sport, and I've turned the wheelie control down. It's got traction control, cornering traction control that is, and cornering ABS, and slide by braking, which I've never used because I'm not a hero. So you can jam the back brake on and skid it out, and it lets you slip to about 15 degrees or something for saving your ass. But yeah, it's laden with electronics for such a, well, low capacity bike, I guess. It's 937cc, it's not particularly low capacity. So yeah, we should probably talk about the engine. That's kind of the heart of this beast. It's 114 horsepower at 9,000 RPM and 96 newton meters, but 30% of that 96 newton meters is available from 3,000 RPM. It's 937cc, but it has got so much power low down. It's a proper angry honey badger of an engine. If you've ridden a Multistrada 950, this tears its face off, even though they've got vaguely similar engines. But anyway, let's hop on, go for a ride, and I'll tell you what it's like. Right, welcome to Negative Corner, where I'm going to list some of the things that have annoyed me about the Hypermotard 950 SP in my year of ownership. Number one, I don't know if you can see this, the strap on the seat. I just end up sitting on that the whole time. You can whip the seat off and unbolt it and take it off, which I think lots of people have done. But you've got to unbolt the seat first. Let me show you what I mean. You've got to undo this Torx head bolt there, and then you can get the seat off. There's a USB socket under there as well. But again, you've got to unbolt the seat to get to it and then dangle the wire out the side. The bike did come with an Optimate lead hanging out the side, and I use it all the time, but sometimes I forget to poke it all the way back up, and it can dangle down and melt on the exhaust, which I have done a little bit once or twice. The only other little grievance which does annoy me on almost every ride is the indicator switch. Now if you're like me, you kind of cancel your indicators even when they're not always on, just to check they're off. And if you do that on this bike, look, I press them, the indicators aren't on, and it asks if you want to reset the trip computer. Then if you press it again, it will do that. And this bike has no fuel gauge, so I use the trip to know how much fuel I've got left. And the number of times I've accidentally zeroed that halfway through a tank and then got a bit confused. It's just one of those things that's a bit annoying. Otherwise, switchgear is all really solid, chunky and easy to use and dead simple. But that is just a bit of a faff. And that's kind of it really. There's just those two things, that seat strap and the indicator switch. They've annoyed me, and the slightly melty, sticky outy lead down here. But other than that, it's kind of been dead easy to live with. Right, that's enough waffle. Let's jump on, go for a ride, and I'll show you what I really, really, really like about this bike. Right, let's hop on and go for a ride then. The hopping on bit, if you're a real short ass, might be a little bit hard than you think, but I'm 6'3". I'm fine. The thing is, once you're on it, it's hard to explain. It actually feels lower once you're on it than it does when you're hopping aboard, because it's cut out in between your legs. It starts with this fancy key thing, pull the clutch in, and it fires into life with actually not the quietest burble in the world for a stock exhaust. It's yeah, it's reasonably raughty. You don't really get any pops or anything. There are some aftermarket exhaust options, not aftermarket, there are some official Ducati exhaust options, namely Termione slip-ons, which keep that twin under-seat exhaust look, and there's a full system which loses the side plastics at the back and it just goes up on the right hand side. It's a single-sided thing. I quite like the look of it, but it's about £2,000, and I'm alright with how it sounds as it is. Right, I'm a bit cold, bike is a bit cold, so I'm just going to take it easy up here, and then we'll go and find some Hypermotard roads to have fun on. And that, to be honest, is almost any road you like, because you don't need big sweepers to have fun on this. It's a naughty little BMX. While it's warming up, let's talk about the riding modes. As I said, you've got Touring, Sport and Urban. Touring and Sport are both full power, 114 horsepower. Urban is about 75 and it softens everything off. Now I've kind of used that as a rain mode, just on kind of like trips around town when it's started pissing it down, as it sometimes does. Touring is full power but slightly softer response, and Sport is the real mode really, Hypermotard, extravaganza mode, and that kind of slackens the wheelie control off a little bit. but it keeps you safe, and you can turn the wheelie control and everything up and down in each mode, so you don't have to worry about not being able to separate traction control and wheelie control. You can. Let's just talk about slow speed riding while it's warming up as well. It's fine around town. The engine is an old Ducati V-twin. Well, it's not old, it's a Ducati V-twin, so low down it does get a little bit lumpy, and it's got high compression pistons and is just a bit angrier than the previous 939 engine. Despite being largely similar, it is a bit lumpier and a bit more aggressive. But you know, it's got a new ECU compared to that bike, so it is meant to be smoother, but it still can be a bit belligerent around town, and you'll use first gear and slip the clutch a bit, but it's kind of worth it for what happens when you open the throttle. That's when it all goes a bit mental. Riding position I should talk about actually briefly. It is kind of weird. It's kind of it's quite upright. It's a little bit leant forward, but you can't really see the screen. It's not in your eye line. You're kind of you feel a bit as if you're flying. When you first get on this bike, you're going to be like, oh, where's the screen gone? Right, first little wheelie out the way. So yeah, you have to look down to see the screen, especially if you're tall like me. It's not in your eye line. Actually, none of the bike is in your eye line, which is quite nice in a way. It just feels like you're magically flying along the road on some angry carpet. It's quite cool. All the controls fall easily to hand otherwise. I've got heated grips on this bike, as I've mentioned. They were about 200 odd quid from Ducati, and I just like having heated grips on a bike. Like, even if it's a fun toy bike, I'm going to go out more of the year if I know I can keep my hands warm. The mirrors are fine. They're a bit loose at the ends. They don't spin around, it's just the ends are loose, so when you rotate them up and down, if you've had a cover on the bike or anything, it's easy to knock them, but whatever. You bored of me doing practical bits yet. I've got a down blipper. That is standard on the SP. It is not standard on the non-SP, but it is an option on it. It's great, so if you do buy the non-SP, get the quick shifter and blipper. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Right, I'm not going to do my usual roads, I don't think, because I like these back roads, these kind of slower, gnarlier roads on this bike. It's just as much fun. That engine is, it's kind of like, it is full of wasps. It is angry. Like if you're in sport mode in second gear, 4,500, 5,000 RPM, pin it and it just goes absolutely bloody flies. And you think, what? This is meant to be like a middleweight bike, yet it pulls from lower revs harder than quite a lot of the Super Nakeds that I've ridden lately. They all kind of like spool up and absolutely bugger off and would leave this for dead. But at real world speed, say 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, this punches so hard out of corners, over crests, and there's always grunt there. So that whole thing about having 82% of torque available from 3,000 RPM isn't just marketing bollocks. It is, I don't know, it just makes riding on the road a real joy. Oh dear. So yeah, it is angry, and I love the way it just pulls from basically nothing, but it's got a bit of a top end. It revs out to just above 10,000 RPM. To be honest, I've not explored up there very often unless I'm on a motorway slip road or something in second gear. But it's got a bit of a top end rush. It's not crazy manic, but it doesn't die off. It just goes and goes and goes. So you're never really worrying about where you are in the rev range. You always feel like you're getting your money's worth from this motor. I love it, and I just feel like Ducati's got this engine. They put it in a couple of other bikes, but it's at its angriest in this kind of BMX chassis. Let's talk about things like the brakes. They are insanely good. They're not the latest Brembo Stylumas, as I've said, but they are perfectly strong. And you might look at that suspension and think, oh, those forks are going to be uber long travel, which they are, but they aren't soft. They're actually quite firm, and that might be a negative of this bike. The suspension is reasonably firm. It's not as soft as you think, but on bumpy roads it's still fun. It's just you get a little pitter-patter pretty much constantly through your arse. But the trade-off of that is just sensational amounts of confidence on crappy surfaces, and on any road you just stick it into corners at frankly not particularly sensible speeds, but it makes fun of like twisty B roads that you'd never bring a sports bike down. And the front just goes light out of every corner, and it just feels alive. It just feels really, really good fun on small roads like this. And the tyres, I think, play a big part in this. So you don't get the Supercourse SPs on the regular Hypermotard. You need the SP to get the SPs. That kind of makes sense. I see what you did there, Ducati. They're unbelievable. They're unbelievably grippy, and it's just a nice chassis that loves to be chucked on its side, even at like 40-50 miles an hour on really tight corners, and it just grips and gives you confidence. And you accelerate out the other side with your bum back on the seat, the front wheel coming up, and you feel, I don't know, it's just one of the most fun feelings I've ever had on a road bike. It's absurd. It's absurdly fun, and I don't think you get that from any other naked, really. Maybe the Super Duke, but you're going like warp speed by the time you're doing that on a Super Duke. Whereas on this, you can pop out of a 20-mile-an-hour corner and just be a little bit cheeky every now and then. There's such an addictive sensation riding this. I just feel like Ducati got this bike completely right, from the chassis to the engine to the brakes. Just, it feels like part of you after a while, just a really naughty part of you. And I'm going to go as far to say I think this is the most fun bike in the current Ducati range. I feel like I've ridden pretty much every bike in the Ducati range, from Diablos to Multistradas to Monsters to Panigales to Street Fighters, and none of them has quite the same real world put a grin on your face as this does. I think it's just the riding position and the poke of that motor. It's something really extraordinary, and I kind of feel like this bike has been a little bit kind of forgotten in the horsepower wars, and the fact it never kind of gets into any naked bike group tests, because the Monster is Ducati's naked, really, and the Street Fighter, this is kind of an oddity, a bit of a bike from a bygone era almost, but it's too good to be ignored. It's honestly been, I think, the favourite bike I've ever owned, and spoiler alert, I'm going to be talking about getting rid of it in a minute, and I'll explain why. But basically the world is opening up and I need something that can do bigger miles. Talking of long distances, this is actually okay on the motorway if you're used to having no wind protection. Heated grips kind of make it sort of alright. Obviously you get a lot of wind blast on your head and on your chest as well. But my knees are quite well protected, and I'm 6'3", and they tuck in quite nicely beneath the tank cutouts. The tank is only 14.5 litres, so you get about 90, 100, 110 miles to a fuel light, and it gets pretty much 50 mpg no matter what you do with it. So it's not the least practical bike I've ever had, and you've got a big seat that you can strap stuff to. I just rock a rucksack and I'm fine with that. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. I shouldn't get rid of it, really, but you know, life is too short to keep the same bike forever. I want to try all the different things. One thing I will say about the handling is sometimes you'll need a bit of back brake to get it turned, but that's just because it's a slightly strange chassis, I guess. But yeah, sometimes you just want to drag a bit of back brake into a corner, kind of help settle the front of it in weirdly. Okay, we're on a slightly faster country road now, and well, I'll show you, it kind of handles really, really nicely even when you pick up the speed. You still just got so much faith in that front end, but when you get to a corner you don't really know if to stick your knee out or kind of stick your foot out motocross styley, or just sit upright on the bike like a normal person does on the road. Cough cough. Front wheel goes light even when you're gassing it in third gear. Obviously it's not got the torque of a big 1000cc, although it is almost. It's pretty damn punchy though, as I've said. It's just when you kind of get up to third gear and fourth gear that you kind of realise, oh yeah, this isn't like a massive capacity bike. Oh my god, it does pick up speed nicely though. It is a fast bike. It just feels so alive. It's just always kind of like wiggling or trying to wanting to wheelie. It is a hooligan bike, and I'm not a massive hooligan to be honest, but I've had so much fun on this. This has brought it out in me a little bit, but if you are a proper wheelie merchant you will get on with this very, very well, I think it's fair to say. Anyway, that's probably enough waffling about my lovely Ducati Hypermotard 950 SP. Go and buy it, it's on eBay. Back to you, Tim, for an outro, and try not to cry. So in conclusion, I've absolutely loved my year with my Ducati Hypermotard 950 SP. It's been, I'd say, easily the most entertaining bike I've ever owned. I've owned sports bikes, adventure bikes, naked bikes, all that kind of stuff. It just works so well on the road. That 114 horsepower is plenty, and it's hard to explain how such a small engine is so angry. It feels violent, and to be honest, that is part of the reason that I'm thinking of moving this on and getting something else, because it is just quite aggressive. But also the world is opening back up again, so I'm going to be doing bigger trips for work and things like that. And on the motorway, it's alright. I mean, I've done kind of 200-mile trips, things like that, but it's just not obviously best suited to it, and I think probably deserves to go to a new home, someone who's been a bit like me the past year and just likes ragging it around on B roads, being a bit of an arse. So yes, it is going up for sale soon, but that doesn't diminish it. It's still a good bike, and if I could afford to, I would keep it and get something else alongside it, but I can't. I'm only a journalist, I don't have a lot of money. So yeah, keep an eye out, might be going up for sale, but you should go and buy one. It is an astonishing bike. It's so angry, it's so well equipped, and it looks after you. It can do all the stunty stuff, but you're never going to flip it if you leave the electronics on, and you take it around the track day and it blitz loads of stuff, I imagine. It's a really cool thing. It's an angry little honey badger, and it's been a pleasure to own pretty much like every other Ducati I've had. I know there's lots of internet myths about Ducatis, but the only times this has gone wrong was my fault for not tightening the battery up properly when I took it out to charge it, and that's it. My fault, basically. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully this was useful if you're looking at buying one of these. Hopefully it's vaguely amusing, entertaining. The 2021 one is on sale. It's not as pretty as this, so I would look for one of the earlier ones, because all they've done is make it Euro 5 and give it a slightly childish paint job. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe if you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon when I won't be sitting on the floor next to my bike.